not surveillance and it's not snooping.
There's a number of people with their hands up. If you want to talk specifically about the surveillance issue, do. Otherwise, we'll widen it out to the question that was put over here with a question from Edward Poole. Edward Poole, please.
Would we see fewer terrorist attacks in this country if we didn't invade or support the invasion of other countries?
I don't know whether this particular Woolwich attack would this count as one of the examples you're talking about?
That sort of thing, yeah.
Being charged.
Yes. Mehdi Hassan.
The short answer is, I think, yes. And I'm glad the questioner put this question. In fact, I've just written an article on it today on this very subject. I don't think foreign policy is the only factor in terms of motivating people, in terms of radicalising people. To pretend it isn't a factor, to pretend it's got nothing to do with it, as Boris Johnson and even David Cameron, I think, was suggesting last week, that we shouldn't draw any link, I think is mad. If you look at all of the people who've been captured in failed terrorist attacks or captured after terrorist attacks or looked at the videos of these people, they all say the same thing. They all talk about invasions and occupations and support for dictators and support for occupations. And I think at some stage you have to ask the question, you know, are we going to take seriously what these people are saying? Are we going to... That doesn't mean you change your foreign policy on the basis of what terrorists demand. That doesn't mean they're justified in carrying out gross and barbaric acts of violence. Not at all. But it does mean if you want to take a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach to preventing radicalisation, you have to put foreign policy in that mix. It can't just be other issues and not our disastrous foreign policy. The former head of MI5, David, said that I warned the government that if we invade Iraq, it will spur young British Muslims towards terror. It will radicalise young men. And now, when you say that, you're accused of being some kind of mad lefty or some extreme anarchist, when the former head of MI5 and various intelligence agencies all warned us what our foreign policy would produce. And it has produced, sadly.
OK. Thank you. I'll come to you. Just a word of warning. This is now, of course, the Woolwich case is sub judice because the one person has been charged, so we must keep off that. But the general point, you, sir.
My point is with regard to the total communication gap which exists between the community leaders and the politicians and the agencies which are responsible for this. Because I can see, for instance, that the community leaders have not played the role which they were expected to play. And I think there is a serious crisis there. They have to win the confidence of the community they are living in and to pass on their aspirations, their ideas to the politicians and to the people, public in general, so that they should know what they're thinking and what their feelings are about.
Okay. Anna Soubry.
I think it's right and fair to say that we often see, and history has shown us this, that when you have disaffected, often young people, they may be angry, they may have other troubles in their lives, that they fall prey often to this radicalisation, to extremism, and it can go to all sorts of appalling levels. And so I think that when we look at, and we do have to be careful because somebody has been charged and so we're in difficult legal territory. But it's an important matter, this, because we know that too many, usually males, in our Muslim community in particular, have been radicalised in this way, and it has caused much upset and anger in the Muslim community because the vast majority of that faith are decent, law-abiding, honest, good people. And I just feel this with some passion, having seen two members of my constituency today who happen to be Muslims. They came to lobby me about my views on plain packaging of cigarettes, actually. But I thought that this was a story worth repeating, that at the end of our very interesting discussion, they said they actually felt the need to apologise to me in some way because of their faith, and to make the point to me that not all Muslims were like some that we have seen in recent events. And I interrupted them to say, you don't have to apologise at all for your faith, because good, sensible people in this country know exactly the overwhelming majority of people of your faith are good, decent citizens, and we are proud to have you in our country.
Don't we get stuck going down a rabbit hole when we only talk about extremism? Isn't it more of a sense of a lack of belonging for young men? And it's a wider sense. The same thing that draws somebody towards Islamic radicalism, it's the same issue as draws someone towards gangs or draws someone towards the EDL or other violent groups. Isn't it more a sense we have to look at a core issue of young men feeling disenfranchised somewhat and feeling a lack of belonging, and we deal with that as a wider issue rather than get stuck down the singular focus of Islamic radicalism.
Alan Johnson, I'd like to bring you back to Mr. Poole's question, was would we see fewer terrorist attacks here if we didn't invade or support invasion of other countries? That was the question.
Well, 9/11 happened before any country was invaded. There would still be jihadists around, I believe, with or without what happened. And in terms of Kosovo, of course, we went in to defend Muslims who were being butchered. And I think the argument there is we probably should have gone in earlier. So there will always be people who want to make that link, yes, of course, and you can't divorce it from foreign policy. I agree with Mehdi on that. Foreign policy has to be part of the mix. But this kind of suggestion that this is all because of, usually about the invasion of Iraq, I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, you could make a very good case for looking at the Middle East if Saddam was still there, if you want to draw those kind of what-if questions, and finding a very difficult situation in the Middle East, as we're finding in Syria.
Alan, I do enjoy the kind of selective quoting of intelligence. On the last question, you told us the intelligence agencies need to be listened to, they need these powers to prevent plots. In 2003, the Joint Intelligence Committee told your government that if we invade Iraq, we will heighten the threat to the UK from Al-Qaeda. And today you say, well, actually, no, it's not to do with Iraq, even though your own intelligence agencies told you it was to do with Iraq.
The point I made was 9/11 was nothing to do with the invasion of any country. That was an attack on America.
It was an attack on America, but are you saying before 9/11, you airbrush people out of history? The Palestinians have been occupied for decades. The West was supporting the Saudi dictatorships. There were sanctions on Iraq for decades. So you can't just start the clock on 9/11 and forget 50 years of unjust, oppressive Western foreign policy in the Middle East.
I want to bring in Edward Poole to ask the question.
I have to say Alan Johnson hit the nail on the head precisely. Before 9/11, there was no question in our minds as a British nation of having an involvement with invading other countries. Our presence in other countries is as a result of what was even voiced by the man who's now standing accused of an awful crime last week. He said, or he's reported to have said, I want to start a war on London streets tonight. We live in a surreal world. We've been at war for many years, and what we are doing is trying to protect our freedom and the safety of our nation. So the excuses given by radicals and terrorists is feeble.
OK. That was Michael Kerr, by the way, who asked the first question. Julian Fellowes.
Yes, for me the issue is not really is terrorism the result of our intervention, because if we were absolutely sure that our intervention was the correct thing and terrorism was a byproduct of doing the right thing, then it would be a much clearer issue.
Agreed.
For me, I'm not sure what we think we are achieving with much of this invasion and involvement. I mean, we read today that Helmand Province is as disturbed and all the rest of it as it was when we arrived, and that's after, 2,000 for every man, woman and child in the country. I mean, I know it's not the money, but the truth is, if we are spending all this money, if we are seeing young men and women give their lives or be maimed or whatever, we've got to be sure we're achieving something. And my problem is that I think we would do more to go in with aid at the end when some kind of resolution has been reached, rather than this inevitable stoking up of the whole thing. I mean, we're at the moment on the edge of it in Syria, and we were told yesterday by our leaders that if we arm the rebels, it'll take people towards the peace table. Well, the next minute America comes in, Russia comes in with their arms for the other side, and we're suddenly escalating, or potentially escalating, a kind of proxy war. It seems to me we're very amateurish in a way about all of this. We're dabbling in cultures we don't understand, and we are not getting the results that we think we're going to achieve. And the one thing all of these countries have in common is that the outsider who goes in to meddle is the bad guy. And that's just true across the board, and we seem not to be able to take that on board.
The woman in the second row there.
I have to disagree with Mr. Hassan, actually. He's saying that this radicalisation and these thoughts have existed for decades. However, what sticks out in my mind, and I'm 27, is 9/11. And a lot of the people who are actually going out and becoming radicalised, being extremists, look at the gentleman last week, he's of my age, of my generation. So this has all happened since then, and that's what you need to target. It's not been happening. Yes, it's been happening for decades, but a lot of people have become aware about it only since 9/11.
Oh, I agree with you. I was responding to Alan's point that 9/11 came out of the blue. It didn't come out of the blue. Obviously, what's happening now is a product of our wars abroad, and that's what all of the terrorism experts say. All the studies show, all of the intelligence agencies around the world say. It's not a controversial point.
Aaron James.
Key question, yes, I think there is a direct correlation, and the number of statements we've heard from young people who have turned to radicalism and extremism, what they are citing is, quite frankly, they want revenge and they want retaliation. Now, fundamentally, we've made some very bad decisions, I believe, over the last few years. We've followed the US, or we've been asked by the US to go into scenarios, war situations around the world with no good evidence, and the weapons for mass destruction was one of the clearest misleading statements to get us into that particular conflict. Syria could be the next one. We've got no justification, we've got no jurisdiction, and we've got no interest. And every single time we follow what I believe is absolutely misguided policy, we are going to fuel young people who, listening to individuals who actually should be deported, and it's as simple as that. There should be none of this, allowing them to stay here and still radicalise people on the streets. We are just going to continue with a problem.
You, sir, and then I'm going to go to the Syria point. Yes, you, sir.
I can't allow one of Mehdi Hassan's comments to go unchallenged. He said, I speak as somebody whose father fought at Monte Cassino in General Anders' army. And he said the Palestinians have been occupied for, I can't remember the period of time he said, but a long time.
46 years, according to international law.
I'm old enough to remember 1956. I'm old enough to remember 1967. I'm old enough to remember 1973. I don't know who the aggressors were, but that is a totally unjustified comment. The State of Israel exists through the decision of the United Nations, and this radicalisation by our going into other countries might be a fact, but we have to do what is right. We got rid of a dictator in Iraq, Saddam Hussein. The situation there might be wrong now, but we got rid of a dictator. If we do the same in Syria, we risk doing the same thing. The opposition there are just as radical as Assad, are just as bad. However, we can't sit back and do nothing. We have to follow our beliefs.
Thank you. I'm going to